What up, everybody? How you doing tonight?
Let's go. Let's go.
Hey, man, sorry for the little bit of delay. I'm going to apologize on your behalf.
Hey, you know what? It was all on me. Andrew, we had set this up for 8:30. I was delayed, but Andrew was so kind to wait 10 minutes. Like 8 minutes. So we're fine,
Yeah.
but we're here to talk some ball.
We're good, man. We're here to talk fantasy football, free agency. I mean, it's first day of free agency. It feels like we were gearing up for a fireworks show, and it feels like we kind of got one. So lots of stuff to talk about tonight. I think we got 18 something players that we're going to be discussing at length. So if you guys are tapping in with us tonight, buckle in because it's going to be a long one. We're going to be talking about a lot of players. We're going to be giving a lot of analysis. So buckle in. I say 60 to 90 minutes. That's probably what we're going to be tonight. But I feel like before we waste any more time, why don't we just Caleb, if they're tapping in on my channel, where can they find you at?
If you're tapping in on Andrew's channel, shout out to you for being a part of the League FFB family. I'm also part of that family, but if you want to tune into my own content, come over to Caleb Nemi at YouTube. I'm live right now too. So not that I ask you to leave Andrew's stream, but feel free to come over, give a subscribe. We do a ton of content together, both during the season, in the off season. Like, Andrew is my best YouTube friend and honestly might be one of my closest best friends. He's become that because we text each other every freaking day about just NFL, fantasy football, YouTube stuff. So definitely we're gonna be here for the long haul for sure.
Hell yeah. And if you guys are tapping in on Caleb's channel, you guys can find me at the League FFB. It's right there by my name. So that's all you got to search up. You'll find it. But with that being said, we got some questions. Anthony says, question of the night: with Cousins to Atlanta, how do you get shares of London? You might have missed your window to buy London. Nico says, how do we feel about Saquon to the Eagles? All of these questions are going to be answered tonight, boys. So hopefully you guys are ready. But Caleb, I have this ordered from like the highest ADP in startups to the lowest ADP in startups. So we're going to be talking about the guys that everybody wants first. We'll slowly work our way down as the degenerates just like to hear us talk about, the Colby Parkinsons of the world for fantasy football. So with that being said, I'm going to start it off because this is how the day started. Technically not a free agent, but first thing in the morning. I guess first thing in the morning was something different. But the first thing that we saw right before the fireworks show was T. Higgins. We got an ESPN report from Adam Schefter saying that T. Higgins is requesting a trade after the Bengals and him have failed to get to a long-term deal. You, my friend, are the Bengals fan. So how do you feel about T. Higgins requesting a trade formally from the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well, it's been no surprise to anyone that T. Higgins was placed on the tag because as a Bengals fan, we always place our superstars on the tag. We piss them off, and then either they end up leaving or they play on the tag and then get just a bigger deal down the line instead of just paying them out right now, where we could maybe get a better deal as an organization. Now, for T. Higgins, if we're looking at it from a dynasty value, honestly, we want him on the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if there's really a spot he could go to. I know we always have this dream of, oh, Patrick Mahomes and T. Higgins on, like, he can be a clear wide receiver one. I don't know there's many places in the NFL that T. Higgins could go and be that clear wide receiver one that might also be a top 12 wide receiver for dynasty fantasy football purposes. So for me, I really hope that he does end up just playing on that tag and can kind of ink out a long-term deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's the best spot for both his NFL career, but also for his dynasty value, which I think is kind of cool that that's tied together. I mean, of course, if he were to get traded to like the New England Patriots, that absolutely tank both his real life value and of course his dynasty value. So for me, I'd love to see him still on the Bengals. Pipe dream, could he end up on the Kansas City Chiefs? Sure. But other than those two spots, there's literally no spot that we could be out here saying, oh, that's a better spot for T. Higgins than the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little video. I don't know where this video surfaced from, but it's been surfacing around the internet the last couple of days. And it's really he said that the four quarterbacks that he would like to play with is CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence. He said he'd like to reunite with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville again because he played with him at Clemson. And then the other ones were Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So he didn't even put Patrick Mahomes on this list of quarterbacks that he wants to play with. So it's an interesting list. I don't know whether any of those are a likely scenario. Now, I will say that Carolina did just get another second round pick with Brian Burns. Maybe that's a situation where they could send a second round pick to Cincinnati and bring in T. Higgins to play with Bryce Young. But again, that's kind of what you're saying is like, that's not an upgrade for T. Higgins by any means if he's going to Carolina. But yeah. I don't know. There's a lot in flux with T. Higgins right now.
Yeah, no, a ton of flux. And I think the other thing that a lot of people aren't considering is you're not only having to trade for T. Higgins, so you have to give up some type of premium draft capital, but you're also going to have to pay him big boy bucks. And so once you kind of have to do both of those, a lot of these teams, especially with this wide receiver class coming in, probably like, hey, I'll just take my shot with Troy Franklin at pick 28 or something like that over trying to trade for T. Higgins.
Yeah, and pay him $5 million instead of the $25 million or $30 million that T. Higgins is going to want. So, yeah, man, things are gonna develop. I think more and more. I reviewed Lance Zierlein's mock draft 2.0 earlier this morning. If you guys haven't watched that video, you can watch that on my channel. But Brian Thomas Jr. was actually mocked to the Cincinnati Bengals in the first round, pick 18. That's interesting if they do end up moving T. Higgins. That'll be very interesting.
No, that'll be super interesting. I mean, I like Brian Thomas Jr., but I also don't know him paired alongside Jamar Chase, like how both of them are very similar builds. Granted, the LSU connection on all of them would be great. But we'll have to see what happens. I kind of have a feeling Brian Thomas doesn't even make it down to the Bengals pick. I think he might crack the top 15, if I'm being honest.
It could happen. It could happen. I mean, his combine was incredible, but with that being said, man, that wasn't really like free agency news, but it was enough this morning that it was like the first thing that hit my Twitter notifications was like T. Higgins requesting a trade. So figured we'd talk about it. But now let's talk about some of these free agents because we have a lot of guys, superstar players, big name players, role players, whatever it's going to be, changing places. Obviously, with that being said, that is going to change the way that we're viewing some teams, some Dynasty fantasy football assets that are not these players. And then obviously it's changing the way that we view the players themselves. So starting it off, Saquon Barkley, he agrees to terms with the Philadelphia Eagles. It was a 3-year deal for $37.8 million, but Saquon goes in the division from the New York Giants to the Philadelphia Eagles. How do you feel about the Philadelphia Eagle running back, Saquon Barkley?
Now, I know a lot of people are excited, but there's also been some people that on Twitter that were not super excited because they were saying, well, he's not going to get the check downs from Jalen Hurts. When the tush push happens, that ain't Saquon Barkley falling in the end zone. That's Jalen Hurts falling in the end zone. And I was like, okay, hold up. Did anyone else watch the Giants games that I was watching last year? Saquon Barkley would get the ball 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and he might have a few inches of grass in front of him before he had to make something happen. And so if we're looking at him, he was like, I think yards created, like still a top 10 running back last season, even at the peak age of 26. Now put him in a situation. I know the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line is in flux just a little bit, but it's not as in flux as the Giants offensive line is. So I honestly, if we're looking at it, Saquon Barkley for fantasy football purposes, I think he probably just etched himself as a top 12 pick next year in your redraft leagues. I think that pushes him up to probably somewhere in like the dynasty landscape. He's not going to gain any more dynasty value just because he's going up in age. But if you're a competitive team, this is like the CMC to the 49ers type of move where I know Saquon Barkley hasn't had any type of level of CMC production, but everything as a prospect, everything of his athletic ability and of his traits, like all of that is still intact and still the same. And especially with him tearing that ACL early in his career, he still has a lot of tread still left on the tires. So I'm pumped for Saquon Barkley. I think this is probably the best landing spot he potentially could have gotten. I mean, a lot of people are excited about Houston, but a lot of those same offensive line questions are still happening with the Texans. So absolutely love that Saquon got paid, got his bag, and now gets to pair up on an offense that's going to be absolutely loaded with fantasy football stars.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think, you said the line is in flux. It's really Jason Kelce, Jason Kelce being the retiree on that offensive line. They're going to have to figure something else out at center. Probably can do that in this draft, but there's going to be some things that are going to change. Obviously, we also know that, what Saquon Barkley has been able to put together over the last couple of years. Like you said, I don't really got to beat it, much deeper, but he's been dominant. And you put him behind an offensive line that has been this good. They just re-signed, correct me if I'm wrong, they just re-signed Landon Dickerson, right, to a massive contract as well. Yeah. And so like they're dialing in that line. And I know I've heard I had a friend in one of our group chats that was talking trash and saying that Saquon has been upgraded to or promoted to Jalen Hurts butt pusher at this point for the tush push. And that's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Unhinged behavior, but it is what it is. I think this is going to be very good for Saquon Barkley. And I think if you had Saquon Barkley on a dynasty team, like this is a guy who can finish top 6 at the running back position this year in this offense, in like behind this offensive line. This is what you want. I really don't know what else we wanted out of a landing spot. Like you really can't get this much better. This is probably a top 3, top 5 landing spot for any fantasy football free agent running back that we could have had. And Saquon Barkley is probably the best free agent running back in this class, debatably, but I would say probably guaranteed top 3. And you put him in that situation, good things are going to happen, man. Now, obviously, you have the running back age cliff and some of the things where it's like, he's not young by any means for a running back in the NFL. He did get a pretty decent sized deal. The length of it is actually a little bit more than I expected him to get. But at the end of the day, man, like, you're buying into Saquon Barkley. And I'm not saying that you should be buying Saquon on your dynasty teams, but if you have him, you're definitely not upset about this.
Yeah, so right now on Keep Track Cut, he's RB9. So like I don't really see there's any way, especially like, the guys in front of him, he's not going to really rise up the Keep Track Cut rankings at all. But I definitely think like when you're looking at a competitive roster, I think RB6, RB5 next year, finishing on a points per game basis, is definitely in his range of outcomes. So that's something that you're definitely going to be trading for if you are a competitive team. And I know Nikki was roasting me a little bit earlier with my some people on Twitter comment, but
People look, the some people on Twitter comment is true. It's a loaded statement, but at the same time, there are so many people out here on the Twitter scope that are just spewing nonsense. And I'm sure people think the same thing about us here in the YouTube space. We're just yapping our heads off and saying a bunch of nonsense bullshit. But hey, it's what we do. This is what we do.
100%. But Nikki, I am taking Saquon Barkley over James Cook, both in redraft and both in dynasty leagues.
100%. Yeah, I would be too. And then Nico, he says, whenever you guys are answering questions, would you rather have Saquon, White, or Pickens in a dynasty startup? Where do you lean here, Caleb? I think for me, it depends a little bit on how your build has went up to this point, but I think I lean Pickens.
Yeah. I always like to take the wide receiver, and especially now that I know we're gonna say the same things we were saying about when Russ joined Denver with Cortland Sutton. I know we'll talk about Russell Wilson here in a second, or maybe we want to dive into that signing. I'm excited because Russell Wilson loves to chuck the ball down the field. That is 100% George Pickens' game. He really hasn't had a quarterback be able to do that in his career. That's had a strong arm, like Russell Wilson does. So I think this is a great landing spot for Russell Wilson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I would be taking George Pickens here. But I also think if I had to rank it, it'd be George Pickens, and then it would be Saquon Barkley, and then it'd be White for me in dynasty rankings right now.
Fair enough. Where do you throw Jacobs in that mix? Because he said Jacobs on the board too.
Yeah, Jacobs is probably honestly the last guy. And it's not because I don't like, I understand like the Packers landing spot's also really great, especially without Aaron Jones for Josh Jacobs. Just comes down to preference and I think what kind of volume is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Well, speaking of them, Josh Jacobs, man, he signs a deal with the Green Bay Packers. It is a 4-year contract, 4 years worth $48 million. Again, I think this was the longest contract of all the running backs that signed today, the most money of all the running backs that signed today in total contract, not from an annual basis. But all in all, Josh Jacobs, he seemed to be the pick of the litter for Green Bay. He's who they wanted. And as a result, they also released Aaron Jones. So we had a total backfield flip here in Green Bay today. So it was a signing of Josh Jacobs. Obviously, A.J. Dillon is still a free agent, and now Aaron Jones is released. So how do you feel about this move by Green Bay, Caleb? And to follow up that question, after you let me know how you feel about Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, what are you doing with Aaron Jones in Dynasty right now?
Yeah. So first, I mean, when the news broke, I was like, oh, cool. Like they're just replacing A.J. Dillon with Josh Jacobs. You still got Aaron Jones. It's going to be kind of a two-head monster backfield where honestly you could look at them probably as the best running back duo in the NFL. Then we get the news they're going to be cutting Aaron Jones. So therefore, then of course, Josh Jacobs' value gets absolutely boosted because we know what this offense is, young, ascending. Josh Jacobs is going to be getting more of the volume. So then you're like, okay, cool. Josh Jacobs gets 60 to 70% of the touches in this offense. If we can project that out, boom, we love that for Dynasty. But even though he is getting older, we haven't seen that high level. It's been almost 2 years since we've seen Josh Jacobs finish as a top 5 running back in fantasy football. Is it 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 2 years ago. Last year, he definitely took a step back in that offense last year.
Yeah, so I think for me, like, I'm excited to see what Josh Jacobs could be in this Packers offense, but at the same time, I'm not moving him up my dynasty rankings. Didn't really change my opinion at all because I just assumed he was going to land somewhere where he was going to be the number 1 running back. Now, in regards to Aaron Jones, if I have Aaron Jones on my dynasty team, a lot of times you start to panic when you don't have a landing spot. He's also getting up there in age, but I am fairly convinced that Aaron Jones is going to sign somewhere. Like Houston Texans could be a possibility if they miss out on, Derrick Henry. think that could be a really great landing spot next to CJ Stroud. We can think of a few more spots because, like I said, we've seen all these running backs kind of the RB market right now is pretty hot. I think it's maybe the hottest RB market that I've seen over the last few years. And
I
so a
think it's
guy like
because the rookie running back class is not looking very good. And so I think because of that, they're paying veterans this year.
which is huge, and they're getting the 2-3 year deals, which isn't just the 1 year prove me wrong, you're getting older type deal. So we'll have to see what happens with Aaron Jones. But if I had him on my roster, of course, his dynasty value has been going down due to age. I wouldn't be that concerned. I mean, it's unfortunate that he couldn't stick in that Packers offense, even if he was going to be splitting carries with Josh Jacobs. But I think he lands somewhere where he can have some fantasy football value next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the injury last year, some of the other, like age, some of the other circumstances that you've talked about, they've been very negative effects for his dynasty fantasy football stock, his value. At this point, I would say that Aaron Jones for today is probably hitting an all-time low. It's probably the lowest that Aaron Jones has probably been since the time he was drafted. That would be my assumption without looking at the data. But I will say I am in full agreement with you where I say that I think that Aaron Jones is going to be a starting running back somewhere, or at least be in a backfield where he is getting a significant workload, some sort of split, probably a 60-40 or something like that at the worst. I think he still looks like he has some juice left in his legs. This is a guy who, when he was healthy last year, and I know a lot of people don't remember it because he was hurt for a good majority of the year, but when he was healthy, he was pretty damn good. And I've heard rumblings today that Minnesota could be a team that is looking at Aaron Jones. And I think if Aaron Jones goes to Minnesota, that would be interesting. Funny enough, Minnesota, and this is just me from my fan lens talking today, but Minnesota was reportedly in on Saquon Barkley as one of the top bidders, and they ended up getting outbid by Philadelphia late. Then they were one of the other bidders in the Tony Pollard sweepstakes. So they didn't get any of the running backs that they were looking at today, but it tells me that they're in the running back market. They're looking for another guy. They must not want to go fully into this next season with Ty Chandler. If that's the case, I think Aaron Jones could be a decent fit in Minnesota. And we got Jacob in here. He says everybody's going to the rivals now. So, maybe he goes from the Packers to the Vikings and wants to play against the Packers twice a year and show them that he still has that juice. So it is what it is. We got Nikki. She says Dallas fell behind while the entire division went off and Dallas just laid there. They didn't have a lot of money today either. I think when they went into this morning, they had about $8 million in cap space. So it's pretty tough for them, I think, today. And then she says, I wonder how many dynasty owners were left holding the Ekeler bag. And we'll get to Ekeler here later in this show. He's a guy that we'll talk about. But you have anything else for Josh Jacobs or Aaron Jones?
No, I think it just, you get an older, aging veteran running back. You're hoping that Josh Jacobs can continue the success that he had, of course, with the Raiders, and then you're hoping that Aaron Jones just lands somewhere. And I agree. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings. We'll have to see. But we got to talk about your Minnesota Vikings here later on because we got a few more holes, major holes that kind of need to be filled on that Vikings roster.
Yeah, I mean, you laid it up. Kirk Cousins signs a 4-year, $180 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. So coming off the Achilles, 36 years old at the start of the season. He's getting a 4-year deal. This is going to take him to his 40-year-old season. He's probably going to finish his career here in Atlanta. This will be the last destination on his NFL career. And yeah, man, it's a decent landing spot. I'm not going to lie to you because you get the weapons of Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a good offensive line. There's some things to like about this landing spot. Now, there are people who I think are saying that this is an upgrade to the landing spot that he was currently in. And I don't know if I fully agree with that being an upgrade. When you leave Justin Jefferson, I don't really know how much you upgrade. But at the end of the day, I don't think he downgraded either. So all in all, I'm interested to hear how you feel about Kirk in Atlanta coming off of the Achilles. How are we valuing this guy and how are we moving with him in our dynasty leagues?
Yeah, I mean, Arthur Blank's just getting old. So he wants to see the Super Bowl brought to the Atlanta Falcons. So he was willing to drop the bag on any type of quarterback that has talent and is breathing. And so if we remember, he was all in on Deshaun Watson a few years ago, comes and gets Kirk Cousins. And to be honest, giving a 38-year quarterback like 200 million buckaroos is insane. Was it 200 or
30,
how much was it? How much was it
he's
guaranteed?
30, he's 36 years old, and it's 180 million, but 100 million of it is guaranteed.
100 million guaranteed. And so it feels a little ridiculous. And so I agree with you. I don't think Kirk Cousins, by any stretch of the imagination, is in a better scenario than he already was in. I just think when us dynasty managers are looking at it, we're looking at it from the perspective of we've been praying for Bijan, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London to have some sort of capable offense around them. And so you just add in Kirk Cousins to drive that ship. And that just makes us all excited. So, like I said,
Yeah.
I think Kirk Cousins' value really doesn't change. I mean, I know he's been a really great quarterback to go buy low for dynasty fantasy football purposes, especially in your super flex spot or your QB2 spot, because he has been pretty cheap, especially coming off that Achilles. But for now, if it's sailed, the ship has sailed on trying to buy low on Drake London. I know a bunch of people, and I'm going to say this again, Nikki, on Twitter. Justin over on DLF, I can name a few, Dynasty Dad. They talked about if you were trying to buy low on Drake London and you think, oh my goodness, now Drake London has a quarterback, let me go buy low now. No, ship's already sailed. Time to go reevaluate, go find someone else, because Drake London, I think he's officially entered top 12 Dynasty wide receiver territory, which he hasn't been in almost since he was a rookie. Kyle Pitts back to relevance. At least we hope. We hope that Kyle Pitts can kind of take that emergence, become an 1,000-yard tight end again. And then I think Bijan Robinson, this is just absolutely fantastic for him. So love the move.
I just think she says I'm in his head. So I think all in all, man, it's good for all the parties involved. I think more so, to me, this doesn't change any way that I was already viewing Kirk Cousins. I view Kirk Cousins the same way that I was viewing him before. I think it's a guy who has low-end quarterback one type of appeal, maybe more of a high-end quarterback two. I think we're still going to see kind of what this offense is with the coaching situation that they have there. Like, there's a lot of things that we still got to see, but I think Kirk Cousins, he has the tools, he has the guys there. Obviously, the Achilles injury is a big question mark. I think that we all got to see him kind of prove that. But at the end of the day, it's a good situation. And more so, the big winners of this entire thing are Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. Those are the guys. The weapons in Atlanta are the ones that win with this type of signing. And then I guess Atlanta Falcons fans, you probably win too, because you don't have to watch Desmond Ridder play football anymore. So that's probably a win if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan. Now for my Vikings, I don't know, man. It seems like, and bear with me because I might go on a mini Vikings rant right here, because this is something that's been long overdue, and not in the sense that we've been needing to move on from Kirk Cousins, but I think for a couple years now, throughout his time in Minnesota, we've kind of had this every single season. There's been this feeling of like, okay, is Kirk the guy who can get us over the hump? We don't really know. I mean, he's good enough that he gives us hope, and then we don't actually ever win anything. And I think that's kind of been the sentiment in Minnesota. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing Kirk Cousins. I love Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was fantastic in his time in Minnesota. I'm very grateful for the time that he played in Minnesota. It was good Vikings football to watch for the majority of the time. But with that being said, he clearly was not the guy. I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Kevin O'Connell, they had a price in mind. They have a plan in mind. They say, this is what we think you are worth. It's not like they just let him go out into free agency and didn't give him any type of offer. They said, this is what we think you're worth. This is going to fit our team's plans for the future. And at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Now, Kirk Cousins, he blew a little bit of smoke, I think, to Vikings fans. And I think this is what kind of hurt a couple Vikings fans out the doors, because Kirk Cousins told us, I want to finish my career in Minnesota. And to me, it's not about the money. It doesn't matter how much money I make. I want to finish in Minnesota. And then at the end of the day, once the clock hit noon and it was time to start negotiating contracts, it became about the money. And you know what? I don't blame you. That's what you do for a living. Like, I get it. You gotta make your money. I probably would do the same. I get it. But at the end of the day, don't tell the fans that it's not about the money, and then you go try and chase the money with Atlanta. It is what it is. But my Vikings, they have a decision to make. We're sitting at 11 right now. There's some rumblings of Sam Darnold potentially being a bridge guy. Guys like J.J. McCarthy in the mix right now, maybe even a trade up for a guy like Drake May. There's a lot of stuff in flux right now, and I'm very excited to see what happens. But to me, as a Vikings fan today, I'm putting it on tape. This is the year that you get aggressive and you make the swing and you call up New England, you call up Los Angeles, you call up Arizona, anybody sitting there in that top 5, you call them and say, we got a package for you because we need to come up and get our next franchise quarterback. And I think that's what has to happen.
Do you think, so I know there's also the rumblings. I know people are thinking Justin Fields, somehow the Bears are going to trade to the Minnesota Vikings in division. No, they would rather just eat Justin Fields and have him back up Caleb Williams and trade him to the Vikings, see him pop off. So I don't think that's a doable option. So honestly, in your personal opinion, like I've heard people say, throw a 5th and go, or a 4th, go get Trey Lance off the Dallas Cowboys. Like, would you prefer you take the bag, you place it in front of the Patriots to go trade up for one of these top 3 quarterbacks in the draft, or would you prefer, hey, let's use pick 11, address another position of need, and maybe we can trade for a quarterback that has maybe the same type of upside, like a Trey Lance later on?
No, I think if we're going to trade the draft capital to go get a quarterback, do it to go up and get one of the game changers that we think is in this class. And whether whoever that is, it doesn't really matter to me. If the coaching staff at the office, they say it's Jaden Daniels, if that's who they think it is, go do it. I don't care. I don't care who it is, but make a play with conviction on who the franchise quarterback is. And if you use the capital, go get one of those guys. I don't want us to use capital on a bridge guy. And then, you get into a situation where you have to do a couple years of bringing in new bridge quarterbacks that are all kind of mediocre. I don't want to get in that situation. And so I think they have the team already there. I mean, when we talk about like prime, perfect landing spots for a rookie quarterback to be able to come in and succeed, Minnesota should be at the top of that list. They have top end, bookend offensive tackles. The weapons are bar none one of the best set of weapons in the NFL. TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. It's ridiculous what they would be coming into. A good coach, a coach that understands offense, played quarterback at the NFL level from a Sean McVay coaching tree. It makes so much sense to go get the rookie quarterback. So I just think that's what you got to do. But I'll get off my Vikings rant. We don't got to talk too much more Vikings.
We became a Vikings
tonight.
podcast for only like 5 minutes, so we're good. We're good.
But hey, it's all good. But I do see a couple comments that I want to address as we get through here, because one of them was in reference to the Vikings. Nikki, she says, "Do I move Hawk? I recently traded for Kincaid and Mayer. Is on the waiver. No waiver priority in our league." Mayer is on your waivers. I would be going to get Mayer right now. Do I move Hawk? Probably not. I think his cost is too low right now. You'd be selling it at a pretty low cost.
Yeah, I'm with you. You're not only selling at the low cost because Kirk Cousins just left, but you're also selling, we haven't seen him post-injury. So you got both things kind of working against you there, Nikki. So we'll definitely hold. And you got clearly you already have the tight end help to hold. And once we get to season, we're week 3, week 4, whenever TJ Hawkinson is ended up coming back being full strength, then that's when I would look to move off TJ Hawkinson.
Mm-hmm. And Ron says, I have Jay Jettas and Drake London in a league, so either way, I'm happy. Probably good situation to be in.
It is actually. I think this is a better for Ron because I think Justin Jefferson will produce fantasy football points no matter who's throwing him the ball. Where Drake London, it was a little bit more. We've seen he needs a good quarterback to produce some fantasy football points.
I totally agree. And Nikki says it would be for the 202 and a 10 team, 1 quarterback league. I'm not selling Hawkinson for that price.
Nope.
So with that being said, let's move on to our next guy. We'll get out of Minnesota. And Nikki brought his name up in the chat. She said, whoosh, that Swift signing was fast. And DeAndre Swift, he goes to the Chicago Bears, signs a 3-year, $24.5 million contract. Like 30 minutes before the free agency period opened, there was rumors that this was going to be Chicago's top priority at the running back position. They were going to make a move on Swift quickly, and they did it swiftly. That's what they did with DeAndre Swift. It happened so fast. Within like 10 minutes of the free agency period being open, they said DeAndre Swift is a Chicago Bear. And I like the fit. I'm interested to hear your fit for DeAndre Swift. He goes back to the NFC North, the place that he started his NFL career. Now he gets to play those Lions twice a year and maybe get some revenge. I don't know. But how do you feel about DeAndre Swift in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, when the signing happened, it was the first big free agent news of the day. So, of course, everyone was pretty excited about it. For me, honestly, I was so excited last year when he popped off week 2 because I was like, oh, this is everything that we were wanting for Swift with the Eagles. And honestly, he had just an okay year last year, finishing as RB 24 on a points per game basis. Now, granted, if anyone watched the Eagles, you know he was vultured at the end zone so many times by Jalen Hurts, but even still, only had 6 total touchdowns. So I think this year coming into expecting with Caleb Williams, the Chicago Bears team that is definitely in a full rebuild, I'm just a little bit nervous about Swift's overall dynasty value. And so right now, while people are excited that he signed somewhere and he's got a lead RB role, I'm probably looking to sell because I don't think he's actually going to produce on the results or what his price is going to end up inflating to be over these next few days. So if you got Swift, would definitely be trying to offload him off your roster for, and I'm sure you could trade for, like we've talked in previous shows about trading down to like a veteran running back, like a James Conner. Maybe you could pick up James Conner in a second for DeAndre Swift. And those would be kind of the deals that I'd be looking to do.
Okay, let me ask you this because he's a veteran running back in this situation. Like, you get Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, or you get DeAndre Swift a little bit younger in Chicago. Both of them, obviously, the starting running backs. Where are you kind of leaning with that?
Yeah, give me Josh Jacobs. We've seen,
Okay,
I think not only that the Packers offense is going to be better, but we've also seen Josh Jacobs be able to produce elite level fantasy football numbers. So I know both of them are older, but at the same time, I look at both their contracts. I look at both of them and I say, this is like, a year to year position at the running back position. So give me the player that I know that's going to be better this year, and that's going to be Josh Jacobs.
fair enough. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a little bit more of a not murky in a sense that I don't think that DeAndre Swift is going to get his touches, because I think you don't pay a guy like that to come in and be your running back without a plan to let him be the lead back. But still, Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, both of these guys are still there. We do expect that offense to take a step forward this year. Obviously, we expect them to draft Caleb Williams. They also hold the number 9 overall pick. We've seen guys like Rome Odunze being mocked there at times too. So could be a much better Chicago Bears offense than we've seen in years past. But at the end of the day, I don't know if Swift profiles to be this this bell cow. And I think we've seen that. Like, we've seen that throughout the course of his career. So again, I'm with you where I'm not expecting DeAndre Swift to be a running back 1 in my dynasty leagues. I don't know if I'm necessarily like looking for reasons to sell right now. I think I'm happy with where he's at. And I think he's properly being valued right now in the community. But with that being said, if he does get some hype and if he does get some buzz where people start getting a little bit crazy for DeAndre Swift, I could see the argument of selling.
Yeah, I think he ends up after this signing. Honestly, I think he gets pushed. If you look at some of the guys on KTC or above him, probably like RB 15 after this signing. So that to me is where I'm just like, not only would I just cheer down to another running back, like I'd also be willing to try to flip out for another wide receiver or something like that. So
makes sense. We got Anthony. He says, which trade package? Fields for Tua, Gibson 2020 and a 2025 second, or Fields for the 108, 201, Gabe Davis, or hold Fields? I'll be
sheesh.
honest, man.
Either.
If I can get the 108, the 201, and Gabe Davis right now for Justin Fields, I'm getting the hell out. I'm getting out of that asset. Honestly, even too, I mean, you being able to get Tua in a second, I'm out. Like I purchased Justin Fields this offseason in hopes that, he was going to get a different situation. I took a little bit of a risk, a little bit of gambling. Holy hell, has the NFL told us that Justin Fields is not worth trading for. That's what they've told us. At this point, I don't know whether it's people not liking Fields or whether it's them not liking the price that Ryan Poles is asking of them to give them Justin Fields. It's probably a mix of both. But at the end of the day, the trade market has shriveled up. I mean, we talk about some of the potential landing spots for Justin Fields. What were we talking about a month ago? Pittsburgh, Atlanta. We were talking about some of these other places like that. Like, there was I'm spacing one right now that was a big one.
Las Vegas.
Like, there's all these places that don't need him anymore. They went and got Russell Wilson. They went and got Kirk Cousins. They went and got Gardner Minshew. Like, it's getting way too slim out here for him to potentially find a starting role. And it's looking more and more like Justin Fields could be a backup quarterback in 2024, which would lead him to being a free agent in 2025, which we know that kind of route that happens is like what happened with Baker Mayfield. He left Cleveland, he goes and he plays with Carolina as a backup, finds himself into a job, and then he goes and kind of plays as a backup with the Rams, and then he gets a 1-year prove-it deal, and we know that route. We've seen Sam Darnold do that thing too. Like, we've seen guys like that happen. The path that they're setting Justin Fields up on right now, it's not pretty. It doesn't look good. There's not a good track record. And I think if you can get out at that cost, sign me the hell up. I'm out, man. I'm out. I love Justin Fields. I loved Justin Fields as a prospect coming into the NFL. But from what we've seen, all the information that we've got to this point today, it's time to be out. And we probably are late. We should have been out a couple weeks ago when there was some buzz. And that's something we gotta live with. I didn't get out either, but they showed us that, man. They showed their cards.
So which one, if you had to pick one of these packages, which one are you leaning towards?
If I need to replace the quarterback, like Justin Fields, let's say Justin Fields is my quarterback 2, and I have to replace the quarterback in my Superflex leagues, give me Tua. But if Justin Fields is my QB3, give me the package with the 108, the 201, and Gabe Davis, because that gives me the flexibility to either replace Justin Fields with a guy like JJ McCarthy at 8, plus also a guy like Troy Franklin at the 201, plus Gabe Davis. Like, I like the flexibility of having the draft picks. But if I need the quarterback, I think all of us would say right now, today, if I'm picking between Tua Tagovailoa and JJ McCarthy in a super flex league, give me Tua Tagovailoa. He's going to receive a contract extension, and he has the safety of what that is. JJ McCarthy is safe by no means.
And Anthony just said Baker is his QB2. So
I think you have enough safety with Baker there that you could take the flexibility. I don't really think that there's, call me crazy, and if you guys think that this is fucking ridiculous, like, just say it in the chat. Like, just say, Andrew, you're off your meds today. Like, it's fine. But I think the difference between Baker Mayfield and Tua Tagovailoa is not that much. Like, I don't think the difference is that much for fantasy football. You may prefer Tua. I think we all prefer Tua, but I don't think the difference is really that crazy. So give me Baker Mayfield, as my QB2, and let me roll the dice. And Nikki's in here. She says you ain't wrong. So it might not be that crazy to say that. So I like it. And she says 108's likely Brian Thomas. So that gives you flexibility to go get something like that. So yeah, man, lots of stuff in play, and that's what I'd be doing there. But what free agent were we talking about before we got on a Justin Fields? DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, we were on
DeAndre
Swift. And Johnny in Detroit was laughing earlier when we were talking about it. So I don't know if he's laughing at the DeAndre Swift arc or what he was laughing at earlier.
Look, Johnny Detroit, he was laughing. We mentioned something about Swift. We mentioned something about the Bears or something. Johnny Detroit, you got it out from me, man. He commented on a BDGE video that I was in, and he said something about, like, thank God we don't have to see him, like, in another video wearing Vikings gear. I'm like, man, you can't even let me wear my team's gear. Like, you got to talk shit when I'm wearing my team's gear.
Hey, man, he hasn't been able to. It's been years. This was the first year he's been able to actually wear his stuff proudly.
God damn, act like you've been here before, Detroit. Come on, get it together. He says, I love you. I love you too, Johnny. I appreciate you. I'm just giving you shit. But he says revenge Lions. So, we said DeAndre Swift can get revenge on the Lions. That's what we said.
Yeah,
but that's where we're at. I don't have anything else for DeAndre Swift. Do you have anything else for DeAndre?
I don't. Let's move on to the next free agent.
We got to get out of the NFC North, or I'm going to keep going on rants. We got to get out of the NFC North. But with that being said, the next running back that we're going to be talking about today is going to be Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, he signs a deal, or is expected to sign a deal. Keep in mind, none of these are officially official for another couple of days, but he is going to be signing with the Tennessee Titans, 3-year, $24 million. And if you have Tajay Spears on your team, today was a sad day. This was a bad day, a very bad day for the Tajay Spears managers, because what we all expected and what I had been telling people on my channel was, hey, look, Tennessee's not going to just bring in nobody. They're going to bring somebody in, but what you want to hope for is that the player that they're bringing in is a complementary piece to Tajay Spears. And my guys that I had mentioned in my videos on my channel was Devin Singletary, AJ Dillon, like players like that could complement him, but you knew that Tajay was going to be the guy. This is a little bit more murky than it should be. And this tells me, and it's unique because I feel like Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears actually are kind of very similar running backs. And you bring them in, you give him the money, this kind of coaching staff, the new coaching staff, the new regime. I don't know. How are you feeling, Caleb? Because I Tajay was one of my guys, and it today was a very bad day. Let's just say it. This is not what I expected.
Well, when a running back that's proven absolutely nothing in the NFL gets up to keep trade cut value of RB15, we should have known we were in for it in the dynasty
Don't
land.
don't tell me that.
So
Sometimes I want to hop on the roller coaster and I want to ride that thing.
I understand, but to be honest, I sold a lot of my Tajay Spears shares during the season because I had a lot of competitive teams, and I was like, I don't think we'll have to see what happens. But then all of the reports coming out of the combine where they were super happy, excited to see what Tajay Spears could do in a more in a lightened role without Derrick Henry. I did not expect them, first off, to drop the bag on Tony Pollard. Did Tony Pollard actually deserve this contract? No.
Probably not.
And
No.
then you put him on a Titans team that's absolutely rebuilding. I'm like, why did we just spend money on Tony Pollard when we have Tajay Spears? Now, dumb NFL teams do dumb NFL team stuff. And so maybe they saw something in Tony Pollard that I didn't see last year on the Dallas Cowboys. So from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, I don't think that this does not improve Tony Pollard's value at all to me.
No.
All it absolutely does is it comes in and absolutely is suicide to Tajay Spears dynasty fantasy football player. And I know someone in the chat, I just saw Ron said, do you think Tajay is the 1A or the 1B now? I mean, I think he's the 1B. You don't pay a guy this type of money and not expect him to start and get all the opportunity. So I think Tajay Spears, RIP to your dynasty value. He probably ends up botting him. I think he's probably going to be like RB26. It's probably where he ends up, like, just because of how dynasty rankings are. And there's not a lot of young quality running backs, but I don't love it. I don't love it, dude. What do you think, Andrew?
I'm kind of in the same boat with you. And look, like my sentiment all offseason was I liked Tajay. I didn't spend a lot to get Tajay on my dynasty teams because he was a guy that I was drafting in like the late second round of rookie drafts last year. And so it was like I threw a late second round pick. The price of admission was generally pretty cheap. And so I told people, I was like, look, if anybody loves Tajay as much as I like Tajay, I'm willing to part with him for a first round pick. Doesn't matter if it's 2025, doesn't matter if it's a late one this year, doesn't matter. A first round pick will get you Tajay Spears. But a second round pick felt like, why would I trade a guy that I spent a second round pick on who has gained value for a second round pick? That doesn't make sense. So it kind of was it's one of those weird limbos where it's like nobody was willing to give a first, but nobody was going to sell for a second. So he kind of just got stuck on a lot of rosters and not in a bad way. I mean, I don't think anybody was upset to have Tajay Spears on their roster this offseason. And at the end of the day, I guess maybe if you would have sold for a second, you recoup your value. But like, I just don't. I think that the value of Tajay Spears is still better now than it probably was when Derrick Henry was there. Can we agree with that?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the price was baked in that he was going to be the lead back.
It was, and it got too high. But I think people now are kind of like, oh well, Tajay's done, like it's over, and it's like, well, if it wasn't over for him when Derrick Henry was there, then Tony Pollard sure as hell is not changing my opinion about him being over with. Like it's still a guy who is talented, and I think that we can, still have hope that the talent will win out. I think last year, if you just watched the games, some people would probably tell you that Tajay Spears looked better than Tony Pollard did last season. So I don't know. There's a lot to bake into it. Obviously not good for Tajay Spears' value. I don't think it's good for Tony Pollard either. Like at the end of the day, like I think Pollard will probably be valued higher than Tajay Spears. But that just means that I want to buy Tajay Spears because I think that they're equal. They're going to be equal splits in a backfield. So just give me the cheaper one of the two. Like it doesn't matter which one's cheaper. If Spears is more expensive than Tony Pollard, I'm more than happy to swap my Tajay for Pollard and a piece. Like that's just the way that I want to play this backfield. Do you think it affects anybody else? Like it doesn't even help like a Will Levis or anything like that, right? Like this doesn't help anybody.
No, I just think this offense is going to be so bad. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins ends up being in this offense in 2024. So we're looking at a complete rebuild of weapons. Will we finally see Treylon Burks break out in year 3? Doubtful. So we'll have to see. I was excited. I think a lot of people were excited about Tajay Spears just because it was like, okay, he's going to get all the volume in a bad offense. The volume's just gonna keep him up there. But now that he's gonna be splitting the
It was
volume,
looking really Rashad White-like
yes,
type of breakout. That's what it
yes.
looked like.
And so I
But
mean, that's my concern. But shout out to Tony Pollard for getting the bag at his age and his lack of
hey, man,
performance last year. So shout out to Tony Pollard's agent.
if you're a running back, you got to get it when you can. So I don't blame you. But at the end of the day, Johnny says Henry over Pollard. If Spears took touches from Henry, I'm still in on Spears. So I get it. And I actually agree with that sentiment. So that's where I'm at. What the hell is going to happen with this Dallas Cowboys backfield?
Hey, I don't know. I have a feeling they're gonna go some rookie way because they can't afford
Jonathan Brooks in the second round?
Jonathan Brooks. Because I don't think they can afford Derrick Henry. We just talked
No.
about their cap situation. There's really no other running back that would be willing to take a Dallas Cowboys type discount out there right now in the market.
Unless they're like gonna go into that middling tier and like sign like a AJ Dillon, but even then, is anybody excited about AJ Dillon on the Cowboys? I'm not.
But maybe they got burned so bad by the Ezekiel Elliott contract that now we are just going to the complete opposite side, and we're drafting a rookie every year in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, and we're not paying a running back.
Rico Dowdle, RB1 season incoming, guys.
Oh,
No,
let's
I'm
go.
just kidding.
Deuce
Don't listen to
Vaughn.
that shit.
It's time, little man.
Oh, dude, I'm sure there's some Deuce Vaughn truthers out there that lost their mind today and said he
It's
has a
time.
path. He has a path. But anyways, Tony Pollard goes to the Tennessee Titans, but that takes us to the next running back. All the running backs were coming off the board today. We talked about him earlier. Austin Ekeler signs a 2-year deal with the Washington Commanders worth up to $11 million, $4.8 million in 2024. Very heavily incentive-based contract. Basically, Austin Eckler's not making any money, bro. When you look at what Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, Aaron Jones is probably going to get a lot more money than Austin Eckler. The mighty have fallen. It has fallen so heavily for Austin Eckler, and he got to a situation where it was nobody wanted to pay you anything. So you might as well just take the money that Washington's giving you because you're going to get work in Washington. I think we all know that Brian Robinson Jr. is not by any means a 3-down back. I know he showed some pass catching chops a little bit last year, but come on, I think he's more set a early down back, and then you have Austin Eckler to spell him. I don't hate the fit, honestly, for Austin Eckler. It's not an upgrade from what he was having in Los Angeles, but I think there could have been worse landing spots. Am I wrong in saying that?
There definitely was a worse landing spots. I think you hit the nail on the head. No matter what Austin Eckler, where he was gonna go, it's done. The Austin Eckler top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20 RB on a points per game basis, he gone. And now, granted, I gotta be careful what I say because my man, he needs to invest all those earnings. So what? He's gonna make $11 million over 2 years. I don't know what the actual guaranteed money is, but let's say
Not much.
let's say after tax, he's bringing home $3 million. He needs to invest that all into his fantasy football companies that he's trying to build up right now. Because, dude, you are about to be right here in this chair talking to me in about a year and a half,
dude. Hell yeah, speak it into existence, buddy.
No, bro. I've been an Austin Eckler hater, so he ain't coming to talk to me.
All right.
Also, there's some people that he works with that don't like me, so it is what it is. But
all
I'm saying is my man needs to start focusing on the not being in football anymore, which is sad because, like I said, it's only been a few years ago when we were looking at Austin Eckler super impressively in fantasy football spaces. So I don't know,
yeah,
man.
I totally agree, and I think when it comes down to it, man, god damn, that running back age cliff is undefeated. It is so undefeated, and when it hits like a Mack truck, baby. It is crazy the way that thing hits you, and so I think the data backs that up. I mean, when I did a episode of Let's Talk Dynasty with War, we were talking about players that you should be avoiding at all costs, like moving forward. And Austin Ekeler was my number one player that, like, no matter the cost of acquisition, no matter the startup price, it doesn't matter. I was never going to be touching Austin Ekeler. And that's not because I dislike Austin Ekeler. It's because the data backed up that he had fallen off. The age cliff, it hit. And the metrics did not look good. And Nikki's in here rubbing salt in the wound. She says Eckler's doing his best Dalvin Cook. And I got Dalvin's jersey hanging on the wall right here, autographed. So that's my guy, but it hits fast, and it's crazy the way that it hits. So, yeah, I could definitely see Austin Ekeler being in that Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette trajectory next offseason. I mean, he signs this deal now. It's very similar to what like Tampa Bay was doing with Leonard Fournette, and even like the New York Jets did with Dalvin Cook. But now look, like, nobody wants fucking Leonard Fournette. We don't care. Like, we don't want him on our rosters. The NFL doesn't want him on their rosters. Like, I think Ekeler could be in a very similar situation. And the way that they set that contract up, the way that the money sits, they could get out of him next year and it won't matter at all. Like, not even, it doesn't matter at all. Like, they have so much cap space right now. It's irrelevant the other year.
Austin Ekeler, meet Antonio Gibson. This is who you will be modeling your game after for the next 2 years. And yeah, no, it's sad. It's sad, but I agree everything you said.
It's bad, man. Anyways, let's move on. We hinted at this earlier. We're going to go back to the quarterback position. Like, middle of the night, dude decides to announce it on his Instagram. So I wake up at 5 a.m. I'm like, dude, I see this. I'm like, I got to start making a video. I got to make some news about this. Russell Wilson, formerly of the Broncos, agrees to terms on a 1-year contract with the Steelers. Catch this. $38 million of his salary this year, $38 million is going to be paid by his previous employer, and $1 million is going to be paid by his new employer. So Russell Wilson will be making almost $40 million, and the Steelers are paying damn near none of it. So why is this not a no-brainer type of move for Pittsburgh?
Oh, it's a massive, because at first you look at it and you're saying, okay, maybe Russell Wilson, he's an upgrade over Kenny Pickett, but like, to what level is he an upgrade over Kenny Pickett? I don't care. You just opened up a ton of cap space by not having to go out and sign like, they didn't have to pay like Gardner Minshew type money to get him. Now, granted, is he maybe a locker room diva a little bit? Maybe there's some concerns about, just the way that he treats his teammates and the way that his teammates view him. Cool. All that's to be said for $1 million for a Steelers team that somehow almost always makes the playoffs, and the last few years have almost made the playoffs without a solid QB. Like, I like this deal. I think Mike Tomlin,
in the playoffs last year.
In the playoffs, I think it's a really great move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll have to see how that impacts all the weapons around him. Like, I'm not bumping up Jalen Warren, not bumping up Najee Harris like in my dynasty rankings. George Pickens probably gets a little bit of a bump. We'll have to see if Deontay Johnson ends up sticking around. Maybe they trade him. I know there's all those rumors out there, but I like the move for Russell Wilson.
I feel like adding the quarterback incentivizes the Deontay Johnson to stick around type of move. But I hear where you're at. I think I agree, though. I think we can slightly upgrade Deontay Johnson for now, as long as he's a Steeler. We can slightly upgrade George Pickens, even Pat Freiermuth. I think all of these guys get a little bit of an upgrade because, holy hell, it does not take a lot to get better than Kenny Pickett, or it does not take a lot to get better than Mason Rudolph. Both of these guys. And at the end of the day, like I said, a no-brainer for Pittsburgh when the old team is going to pay, 98% of your salary. Dude, you could come in and play quarterback for me today. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, man, it just makes a lot of sense for them. I think all in all, it also shows the hand of Denver. We kind of knew that this was coming around, but I think also with like recent trades in the last couple of days, Jerry Jeudy being traded to the Cleveland Browns, there's still some more things unfolding. The Justin Simmons, their safety that was released. Like, this is a team that is blowing it up. They're blowing it up after they had just paid Russell Wilson some Walmart money. And even the craziest thing about this is Russell Wilson has not seen a single dollar from the extension that he received from Denver yet. He hasn't received all of the money that he was being paid was from Seattle. And now he's going to Pittsburgh and he hasn't been paid by Denver. It's carrying, dude. This dude is making money from everybody other than the teams that are paying him.
Hey, but that's how it is. If only that's how it worked in corporate America. You get in, you get out, and you somehow still get paid. Like that's
Dude,
the motto, and Russell Wilson's living by it.
I need to find the damn job that will give me $250 million to not work for them.
You know what they say? No, but what they say is they look at you. You come in and do a year's work, and then they say, "I'm good," even though I'm on the hook, and then they still agree to pay you. It's
Here's
crazy.
1 week severance, buddy.
Crazy.
Little close to home.
Crazy.
Little close to home, huh?
Little close.
Nikki says Russell Wilson is a dang thief. That's what he is, man. He's a damn nuisance as well. He's out here. I hope Pittsburgh has a plane big enough for him to hit the high knees down the aisle, because that's what he was doing in Denver. But this isn't me just poo-pooing on Russell Wilson. Actually, I think this is a good. I really do think it's a good move for Pittsburgh.
We'll get off topic here for a second. What do you think his catchphrase is going to be? You can't say "Let's ride" anymore because that was a Denver Broncos thing. He's going to come up with something, for the Steelers.
I don't know. I saw a good one today on Twitter where they said the over-under on Russell Wilson to tweet "iron sharpens iron" within the first 90 days of being a Steeler, and it was like minus 350 or something.
Okay.
So there's gonna be a steel iron type of reference. He's gonna bake that into his personality a little bit.
Funny to see.
Anyways, let's move on. Talking about a guy that we were helping Anthony out with his trade. Gabe Davis signs a 3-year deal for $39 million. He goes over to Jacksonville. This is now Trevor Lawrence's new wide receiver 1, and probably going to be the wide receiver 1 when it's all said and done. They don't have a lot of cap space. I know that we talked about them kind of making this as an indication that they are not going to be bringing back Calvin Ridley. We also know that if they did bring back Calvin Ridley, it was going to cost them some draft capital as well. So looks like this is the move. And how do we feel about Gabe Davis as Trevor Lawrence's wide receiver 1, 2? It's however you view Christian Kirk. I think I prefer Christian Kirk, but Gabe Davis definitely profiles as the X.
Yeah, I mean, boost Kirk and Evan Ingram up your dynasty ranking just slightly based on the signing. But holy crap, man. This GM for the Jags, okay, cool. Yeah, Nicky, we can be happy for Gabe. But my man also, a few years ago, overpaid for Zay Jones. He looks at these wide receivers that are vertical threats and goes, yep, that dude on my team is going to be a monster, even though he has proven nothing in the NFL to be a monster. Now, we've been waiting for the Gabe Davis, we saw the 4 touchdown, 3 touchdown, 4 touchdown, 3. What was it in the playoffs? 2 years ago. Whatever.
I feel like there's multiple games where he's went for 200 yards and multiple touchdowns.
Multiple touchdowns where he gives you this glimpse of just you're like, this guy could turn into something special. And then it just never has happened.
Is that Gabe Davis or is that Josh freaking Allen that makes that happen? I think it's Josh Allen.
I think it's Josh Allen too. He just, I mean, we already know how amazing Josh Allen is, but that is not going to be the case with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, they're so worried about Trevor Lawrence and wanting him to still be able to rush. They signed Mac Jones or traded a 6th-round pick to go get Mac Jones. So they have a quality backup. That's not CJ Beathard. I am concerned about Trevor Lawrence.
Apparently CJ Beathard has been having health concerns this offseason. I don't know whatever that means, but they said basically he wasn't cutting the job, so we need to get another guy.
100%. And so hey, if you're a Gabe Davis truther, this might be your moment to go try to sell high, get a contract. But man, I'm happy. I don't have a ton of shares. I actually have 0 shares of Gabe Davis, and actually league in best ball I have a few, but that's a different story. So dude, what are your thoughts on Gabe Davis? I'm just at a loss that he got as big of a contract as he did.
I'm in the same sentiment. To be honest, I thought he was going to get some money. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to be the Jaguars that paid him, but I said in my free agent predictions video that this was that guy that profiled as a trap. A team was going to overpay for Gabe Davis because he's shown, some athleticism on tape. He's younger. He has that profile, that size, everything that you want. But it was hey, he didn't really get his shot. He didn't really perform the way that we thought. And you can say, well, he was playing alongside Stephon Diggs or whatever. But I'm like, this guy had as good of a goddamn shot as you can get. You're playing with Josh Allen, and you're the number 2 wide receiver on an offense that's throwing the football for like 45 touchdowns a year. Like, what are we talking about? Like, this guy got as good of an opportunity as he could possibly get. The only upgrade is if he goes to Kansas City and plays with Mahomes. That's the only place that it's an upgrade. Everywhere else is a downgrade. And I think it's fine. In fact, I do think that his dynasty value will see an increase from a community perspective. Like, I think a lot of people are going to think more positively of Gabe Davis now because they're going to think, well, he's the number 1 wide receiver now.
No.
A lot of people don't like Christian Kirk. They think, he's just another guy. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to get a little bit of a bump. It's just probably not worth it for me. I would never have been in the first place, but I'm definitely not sticking around if his price goes up. I mean, if his price goes up, where are we selling him at? I think for me, like, if I could get any second in the top half of the second round, like, get me the hell out. I'd rather have one of these rookies. I'd rather have Xavier Worthy. I'd rather have Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, he's going to go even earlier than that, but like, I'd rather have Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman. Like, let me take the shot on those guys over what I know Gabe Davis is.
Yeah. So Gabe Davis right now is wide receiver 50 on Keep Track Cut. So if we look, like, you could probably get up to like a Troy Franklin. He's like wide receiver 48. Right now, or like even like a Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson. Like, I take any of those guys over Gabe Davis, and a lot of people are probably gonna be excited, like you said, with this huge contract for Gabe Davis. So, yeah,
dude, that's a sneaky one. That's sneaky because I think a lot of people are viewing Hollywood Brown really negatively right now, and he doesn't have his next landing spot lined up yet. So if you can swap Gabe for Hollywood Brown, and even off of today's news, you might be able to get a piece thrown in with Hollywood, and that's the sneaky move. That's what I'm doing all day long. Johnny says Gabe Davis is the new DJ Shark. Gabe 3B Davis, best ball beast. BB player for sure. Gabe a pure bench depth player. Look, they say late at night, if empty your flex spot, you can still hear that somebody. Gabe Davis won't start me. There you go, baby.
Let's go.
So I think we all agree. But let's move on. Let's talk about another running back. Saquon Barkley left New York. Will enter Devin Singletary on a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. I can't imagine that they are done adding to this running back room. But with that being said, Devin Singletary certainly looks like the guy who's going to get the shot to be the running back 1 here, at least for this year. How do we feel about Devin Singletary as the New York Giants running back 1? Because when he got some run last year for the Houston Texans, now keep in mind, a lot better of a football team than what the New York Giants are, he did look pretty decent.
Listen, I've been saying this. This is now my 2nd year saying this. Devin Singletary, when you hear that name, you literally just say, Jag, just another guy. So the fact that he got this huge contract is absolutely insane. Now, I know you said, okay, he had some flashes.
It's not that much of a contract. 16.5. I mean,
still, the fact is, he only averaged 4.2 yards per carry this year on a Texans team. Granted, I know he played for the Bills, so that had a little bit of a better offensive line. Josh Allen had more of a threat to run. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry with them, but still only 9.8 fantasy points per game, RB 36 on a points per game basis. Listen, I've been out on Singletary. I'm still out on Singletary. This contract, this situation doesn't change it for me. And the Giants are going to be so bad. They might actually be the worst offense in football. I don't know if I can think of a worse offense than what you got. Hyatt, Darren Waller, potential thinking about retirement. Wandell coming off of his injury. You got Singletary in the back. And is it going to be Danny Dimes at quarterback? I mean, so many question marks that just, I don't think it's going to be a good, if Saquon Barkley couldn't erupt in behind this Giants offensive line, trust me, Devin Singletary is not going to be anything special. So that's kind of how I feel about Devin Singletary.
I agree. I think this is in contention for the worst offense in the NFL. It's just what it's good. That's where it sits. I think the only other one that can contend with it right now, it's the New England Patriots. Their offense is pretty damn bad, but they have a top 3 pick in this draft. Like, they could make some changes here and it could get a little bit better. But Holy hell. It just feels like the New York Giants, best case scenario for them is at 6. They're going to be able to get a guy like Malik Neighbors. Like, that's the best case scenario. But then even then, like, do you want Daniel Jones throwing Malik Neighbors the football? Ah, man, I don't know. It's so bad. It's not good. And Devin Singletary, I think he's going to be one of those running backs where I think if you put him in your lineup, you probably are not contending for a championship anyways, buddy. Like, or you had a hell of a lot of injuries. So, like, we probably aren't putting him in our lineups anyways. And Anthony's in here. He says, what flavor do you prefer for our haterade? He says, what flavor do you prefer? Mine is grape. So, for me, I think I prefer Giants orange. That's the flavor that I prefer for the haterade.
Yeah, I've never been an orange fan either. I'll take any of the other flavors. But
Actually, I like the orange one, but
you like that? You weirdo! I knew it. I knew it.
Probably a very unpopular opinion because this is a very popular flavor, and we're getting off topic here. Anything, any type of Gatorade, Powerade, Prime, any of those drinks, sports drinks, any type of things that is fruit punch flavor is by far some of the worst drink that I could ever have in my life. I hate fruit punch flavor so bad. I'll never drink fruit punch. So any red sports drink, I'm out. Not drinking it.
Sheesh. Okay, I hear you.
But yeah, I'm a sucker for lemon lime though.
I do like the lemon. Yeah.
Yeah, but we can move on. We don't got to talk about Devin Singletary. I think what low end RB2 for your fantasy teams this year?
Yeah, I mean low. I think he's probably high end RB3. Just being honest.
All right. Well, moving on to another low end RB3. No, I'm just kidding. We are going to be talking about Antonio Gibson, who did sign with the New England Patriots, and he gets a 3-year, $11.25 million contract. Not a lot of money, not a lot of money at all. This is very little money. He goes and he plays in New England. We talked about, I said that was going to be one of the worst one of the worst offenses in the NFL this year, or at least in contention for that. And Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson. I mean, how do we feel, Caleb? How do we feel about this backfield?
So from the beginning of Antonio Gibson coming into the NFL, I always was pretty high on him. Like I thought, he had the receiving characteristics, and no, Ramondre's still there. So I think Antonio Gibson definitely slides into that pass catching back in this offense. And granted, we can think of, there's been so many great third down backs, like the James Whites of the Tom Brady area. But the thing that makes me really concerned is, like we said, this offense absolutely blows. And it's not like I know I was giving the haterade to Devin Singletary, but right now, at least at this current moment in time, Devin Singletary isn't competing with anybody of any stature in that Giants backfield. But you come and you're like, okay, Antonio Gibson's the clear RB2 on this Patriots team. And so the real reason Antonio Gibson wins is because he's able to catch the ball out of the backfield. And like we said, I know Jacoby Brissett, pretty good quarterback, but also has a little bit of mobility. So for me, I don't think there's a ton of upside here for Antonio Gibson, unless all of a sudden this offense turns into a top 15 type offense, which I do not foresee happening, unless maybe, who knows, maybe whoever they draft at 3, maybe if they get Jaden Daniels or Jake May, they're able to absolutely translate this offense right before our eyes and pull what CJ Stroud did last year, but highly doubtful. So for me, if you have Antonio Gibson, you're probably holding him as a bench RB depth piece, but if not, you kind of just got caught holding the bag, which I have Antonio Gibson in a bunch of leagues, and I was hoping he would land on a team where there'd be more upside, but sadly, I don't think there's much to gain from the signing.
I've never been a big Gibson guy. I just didn't think his profile really translated to fantasy success. Like you said, you see the type of profile that he is, and it's those types of players need to have very unique situations to be successful. And I just don't think this is the situation. And Roll was in here. He says Gibson's the older Bucky Irving. And I don't know if that gets me more unexcited for Bucky Irving than I've ever been. Like, if Bucky Irving is Antonio Gibson, this sucks for Bucky Irving. Now, I'm not a big Bucky Irving guy in general. I probably have him closer to my back half of my top 10 than I do my top half. But yeah, man, it's crazy. And Caleb, I see you in here. You said we'll answer the question eventually. We got Caleb Williams. I mean, Justin Fields conversation coming up on tap here very shortly. So we will be talking Justin Fields, trying to keep the comments at least in the same topic. So we're not bouncing all over the place. But with that being said, man, I don't think that there's a lot to desire out of Antonio Gibson here in New England. And I mean, there was a lot of people that were in, our community specifically that were telling people, go buy Antonio Gibson and stash Antonio Gibson to see if you can, get some value here. And it's like, what situations would have been situations that would have been beneficial here? Like there's not a lot of running back rooms that would be able to put Antonio Gibson in them and then give Antonio Gibson a lot of volume. Like Antonio Gibson's never going to receive a lot of volume ever.
Yeah. I think a lot of people just thought, like, for me, if you're like, okay, cool, like maybe he gets some cheap deal to go to the Chiefs to be the new Jerick McKinnon. Like, I think you could swing people on those type of circumstances. And I think that's where a lot of the hope was coming from. But like we said, there's only one Kansas City. And like Antonio Gibson did not end up on Kansas City, actually ended up on the far opposite end of the spectrum with the Patriots. So yeah, I think the idea that you were going to buy low on Antonio Gibson, no, if you were holding him, you were just praying for the best possible outcome, because to be honest, he was probably not that you were going to drop him to your waiver wire, but depending on your league size and your league depth, like Antonio Gibson's just been riding your pine for the last 2 years. So I don't know. I wish it was better, but it's sadly not.
Yeah. And look, this is me. I'm going to issue a challenge to the fantasy football community as a whole. If we're out here, because I do feel like that this is something that fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football managers don't think about when they consume content like that. Like, because there's 100 fantasy football creators out here that are going to give you their 5 stashes of a season, and it's going to be random names. And sometimes there's not a lot of context to the reason why they're telling you to stash these players. And at the end of the day, like, what the hell are we stashing them for? Like, when I look at the player, I need to have some sort of range of outcomes. Like, and that should be something that we talk about as fantasy football content creators. Like, when I'm telling my community to stash somebody, at least when I'm doing it on my channel, I do it with fucking conviction. Like, I research that shit, and I have a reasoning for why I am telling you to stash this player. I will back it up with the analysis, and I will give you a range of outcomes. Sometimes I feel like we as a community will say, go stash Antonio Gibson because he could get into a better situation. And we leave it at that. That's very vague. What the hell is a better situation? Is he an RB2? Is he an RB1? Like, what the hell do you expect out of him? And if we just spend a little bit more time as a community saying, hey, let's stash Antonio Gibson because I think he has the ability to increase in value from an RB3 to an RB2. If we set that as the expectation, I think people would think a little bit differently about how they are purchasing these assets, because sometimes it gets very, very dangerous and very out of control, because you'll say, oh, go stash Antonio Gibson because he could be on the Kansas City Chiefs. And then people are like, holy hell, let me go give my second round, my 201 for Antonio Gibson to stash him because this running back class is trash. And Antonio Gibson, if he gets on the Kansas City Chiefs, he's going to be better than all of them. It's irrational behavior. So as a community, and I'm sorry I'm going on a rant here, we need to do a little bit better of a job as giving context as to why we are stashing these players and what the range of outcome is for those said players.
You spoke it. I mean, I hear you. Listen, we do not put out, me and you both, we do not do a stash video every week, because then we look at at the end of, from January to March, we have given our communities 100 different stashes. And it's like, of course, we give you 100 different stashes. Like, we're going to hit on a few of them, but like, what's the point? What's the absolute point to giving you 100 different stashes when relatively we need to be telling you directly, like, how that's going to correlate to your rosters and what those type of trade packages that are actually going to benefit you and get you the points per game different, the warp, the wins over replacement. Like, those are the type of conversations we need to be having instead of, let's go stash some Hunter Renfrow because he's going to be, getting more, like 2 more targets this season. Like, that's not going to win you any league.
Who the fuck cares about Hunter Renfrow? Who the fuck cares? Like, I don't want him on my team. If he's on my team and he goes to a better situation, I'm probably not playing him because he fucking sucks. I don't want Hunter Renfrow. Like, why am I stashing Hunter Renfrow?
If
Anyways,
you're if you're
Nikki
playing Hunter
says,
Renfrow, you're already screwed. So that's what it
let's
comes
hear
down.
your 100 stashes. So lay them all out. I need 100 stashes right now. But Nikki says stash one this offseason has to be Chase Brown. That's not an irrational stash. You can stash Chase Brown.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of data that you can use to back it up. Although
Yeah.
I do think that the Bengals, just personal opinion, I do think the Bengals will be sticking with Joe Mixon this season. But
And I think they'll be drafting someone too. That would be my
you think so?
yeah.
But Shane says, "What up, boys? Or what up, dudes? Today got my blood pumping again. Love the offseason moves. Yeah, man, it's exciting. It's
Oh,
getting to that time. So,
yeah.
uh, anyways, man, enough with my Antonio Gibson. If he's on your roster, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, it doesn't matter. He's not gonna be good. And I apologize for my language, but at the end of the time, like end of the day, it just if somebody believes in Antonio Gibson and this forever for whatever reason gives them hope again because people have a lot of hopium with players like Antonio Gibson, like if this does that for them, sell his ass today, like get him out of here. But talking about another player, another running back that's going into a situation that's going to be new, and actually a player that I like more than Antonio Gibson will be Gus Edwards. He signs a 2-year deal in that Greg Roman offense. Keep in mind, Greg Roman brings his boy, Gus Edwards, over to the Los Angeles Chargers. We know that they just lost Austin Ekeler. They got Isaiah Spiller, some of these other guys on the roster. Gus Edwards right now, and I don't expect this to remain, consistent throughout the next couple months, but right now, Gus Edwards looks like he's going to be the RB1. I profile him more as the RB2 of this offense. I think, hot take here, and what is the date? It's March 11th. So the NFL draft is a month and a half away. I think Blake Corum is going to be a Los Angeles Charger. Like, I think it's going to happen. I just don't know why Jim Harbaugh would not go get his boy. Like, I think it's going to happen. So with that being said, though, Gus Edwards, he goes to Los Angeles in that Greg Roman offense. How do you feel about the reuniting of those guys here in Los Angeles, Caleb?
Yeah, I think it's really similar to what we saw production-wise with the Baltimore Ravens this year. Of course, like Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, very similar quarterback play. I know Greg Roman has had his, we were excited to see him gone out of the Baltimore Ravens offense. But even this last year, I know it wasn't in Greg Roman's offense, but Gus Edwards had 13 total touchdowns. Can he get 10 to 13 total touchdowns this year for the Chargers, which I assume just based on Jim Harbaugh's, background, absolutely loves to pound the ball, a lot of play action. I think so. So I'm excited for Gus Edwards. I think honestly, this is probably one of the better landing spots for any running back out of this free agent class, but especially for a guy like Gus Edwards, who is so touchdown dependent. I really like this move for Gus Edwards.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about, Caleb. If you got a Shane in your league, and Shane, I love you, brother, but if you got a Shane in your league that loves Antonio Gibson like this, sell Antonio Gibson to the Shane of your league. Sell him to him because he'll buy him. I promise he'll buy him. But I in the leagues that I play in with Shane, you already have Antonio Gibson, you asshole. You already have him. So
Hey, he's trying to drive up cost. Hey, let the man cook. Let him cook.
Nikki says, I love the Shanes, and Shane says, love you too, buddy. But that's where I'm at. He says, I have Antonio Gibson. So with that being said, though, Roll says, as a Chargers fan, I want to see Spiller to do something this year. He was one of the better backs coming out of college. EK finally out. I wouldn't trade a pick for him, but if he's on waivers, I like the stash. I don't mind the stash. Totally different coaching staff. So it does, worry me a little bit when a new regime comes in and they don't have any of the same guys that they had before, especially when there's guys in this rookie class that those are their guys. Like, I really do think Blake Corum, like I would lose my mind if Blake Corum goes to the Chargers. Like, I think that would be the one, maybe one of like 2 or 3 landing spots total that if Blake Corum lands there, we could potentially be talking about him as like a first round rookie pick. Potentially. Hot take, I know.
It's a hot take. It's hard to convince me just because there's nothing, and we don't need to dive into Blake Corum's tape, or he just doesn't have, I feel like, the athletic traits to be an elite level running back at the NFL level, whether we're just talking running back or for fantasy purposes. So that's my only concern. But at the same time, if we're talking about, okay, you're playing in the Chargers offense with Justin Herbert, he'd have to be really touchdown dependent, which we just have Gus Edwards just get it added. So that would be my only concern with Blake Corum. But overall, I really like this Gus Edwards landing.
Yeah, looks like some people got excited. 201, Corum want that pick. She says, dude, stop. You're going to get me to take him at 5.
Don't do it.
Roll says, Blake Corum goes to the Chargers. I go from full on avoid to reaching for him. Shane says, I'm with you on the Corum Gym reunion. So it sounds like that's what the people want. Let's see if we can get the people what they want. But at the end of the day, man, I think it's I think the landing spot for Gus Edwards is good. I think he's going to be able to be in a situation where, he should see some pretty significant red zone opportunities, end zone opportunities as well. Like, this is going to be a good situation for him. And we know that this Chargers offense is probably going to have a new identity. It's a very different Chargers team than years past. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But at the end of the day, man, I think he has real value right now. And not that I would be paying a lot of money to go get, or a lot of assets to go get Gus Edwards right now. But if somebody's willing to give me Gus Edwards for any of my thirds, I'm throwing him on the bench. And when those running back injuries start to pile up, I might have something there in Gus Edwards.
I got one for you. I want you to think about Gus Edwards or Zach Moss.
We don't know where Zach's going to be, but I would say, just based off of the talent of the two players, I like more of what I saw out of Zach Moss last year.
Okay.
You know who's been talking to Zach Moss? Minnesota.
Hey, you know what? He's a better. He kind of fits what you guys like up there. He's a better Alexander Madison. So go get some.
Amen. Amen. We'll see what happens. You know what? Maybe Minnesota's going to be one of the surprising teams that looks at Jonathan Brooks or somebody in the second round and says, pull the trigger. Let's get a guy like that in here. I wouldn't mind that, to be honest. Shane says, y'all should invite me to your leagues if you're taking Thomas and Nix at 5. I think one of the leagues Shane was mentioned, it was a 1 quarterback league. So it was a 1 quarterback. And I think the Knicks one was a troll. Johnny says Minnesota would be a good fit for Moss. I agree, man. I think Minnesota's a good landing spot for any back, because I don't love how Ty Chandler's fine. He's fine. I think that describes what Ty Chandler is to a T. Like, he's fine, but I don't really want him to get 20 carries a game. Like, it's not good for my team. So let's not do that. Anyways, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next player. We got 4 more players that we're going to talk about. I know we've been at an hour and a half, so we got to get through these. But let's talk about this quarterback, because he signs with the Las Vegas Raiders. Gardner Minshew gets a 2-year contract. The money, what I saw was, I'm actually trying to fact check it right now. The money is $25 million with $15 million of it guaranteed. That's starter money, kind of.
Yeah.
So, is Gardner Minshew going to be the starting quarterback for the Raiders this season?
Yeah, I mean, he's upgrading the van, that's for sure, with that type of money. I think he is, and I think it was crazy because I didn't expect. I expected Gardner Minshew to get backup money again, go to maybe a spot where he can compete, which I guess is kind of where the Raiders are heading with maybe a Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell type battle. But I wasn't expecting this at all, and so when this kind of dropped this afternoon, I was like, holy crap! Like, the Raiders are going all in on the stash, and so that's what I think. I'm excited if you have him in fantasy. I mean, you were probably stashing him. He was like, I guess you were playing him, maybe potentially starting him in a super flex league. But right now, I mean, his value has gone up. He's gotten the contract. He's in an offense where there's still a lot of question marks. Like, is Zamir White going to be the lead RB? Like, what's going to be happening with Devontae Adams? Are they kind of headed into a full-on rebuild with the Raiders? But we saw some life out of the Raiders last year. So Gardner Minshew kind of fits into that culture really well. So I do like the signing for the Raiders, and for Gardner Minshew, of course, to get that type of bag. Shout out to his agent. Shout out to Gardner Minshew and the stash for securing the deal.
Yeah, I got something in my eye right now. I promise I'm not crying over that.
You just wanted him so bad in Minnesota. Once Kirk Cousins left, you were like, I just want the stash in Minnesota, and
I know
just didn't happen, you know.
I know. But Shane says Minshew is a great thrower of the football. Never hasn't been. Peep the touchdown to interception ratio. Shane, if there's one guy that Shane I think Minshew might be his favorite player of all time. Just knowing my guy. Now in all fairness, Shane, I hope I'm not outing you, but he went to the same college as Gardner Minshew at the same time, so they actually like had interacted with each other in person. So I think that's kind of plays with or plays a role into that. But with that being said, I do think that this is going to be a potential competition between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. I think what this tells me and the amount of money that they gave Gardner Minshew kind of tells me that I feel like Las Vegas has almost taken themselves out of the sweepstakes of JJ McCarthy. It's almost like they said, "Hey, we're sitting at 13. We know that there's going to be some teams willing to trade up. We're not one of those guys. We're not willing to do that." So maybe they're still in contention for a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix at their second round pick. Maybe that's something that they're willing to do, or maybe they're going to even do like a Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Spencer Rattler in the third. Like they could still do something like that. But with that being said, I think Minshew looks like and should be, just based off of the talent of Gardner Minshew, the starting quarterback in Las Vegas for 2024. And with that being said, that should have some value. So what would you be willing to give up for Gardner Minshew in a super flex league if you needed quarterback?
Yeah, if I need a quarterback, I mean, I'm probably trading anything past 203, 204 for him. It just kind of reminds me of like what I was willing to do for Jimmy G last year on a few teams. Now, granted, we didn't get to see Jimmy G actually show out and be the quarterback that we were hoping for. But maybe the 203 is a little too rich for you. But anywhere I would say like 204, 205 on, that'd be a pick I'd be willing to trade. In regards to like players, I haven't even checked where he's located on like Keep Trade Cut or anything like that, but I'm sure he's about to go absolutely skyrocketing.
Yeah, I was going to say, my guess is wherever he's at right now, it's not going to matter because he's going to be valued more than that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it probably won't matter.
Yeah, he's QB 35, so he's probably going to be QB 30.
He's going to be a top 25 quarterback by the end of the week. I just imagine just the way that the money is laid out, the way that we expect him to potentially be the starting quarterback. There's not going to be many quarterbacks that are going to be less than him. But with that being said, I do think I would be in the same sentiment where if I'm a QB needy team, I'm willing to throw a second round pick to go get Gardner, like almost guaranteed. Like I'll throw almost any of my second round picks to go get Gardner if I need quarterback. And with that being said, when I say needy at quarterback, is maybe you do have a Baker Mayfield at QB2. Maybe you don't even have a quarterback 3 on your roster. We're talking super flex leagues. You need to go get that QB3 in case of bye weeks and injuries. I'll go get Gardner Minshew for a second.
I like it.
So, all right, man. Well, we got a couple more. You requested we put this guy on the docket. I wasn't even going to put him on here.
Yeah,
but we got Noah Fant. He re-signs. He was a free agent, ended up testing the market. The market didn't give him what he wanted, so he goes back to Seattle, $21 million. What do you feel about Noah Fant here going back to Seattle? Speaking of a guy that everybody in the offseason was telling you to go stash, this is like probably everybody's number one tight end stash of the offseason. Probably every of your favorite fantasy football analysts, content creators, whatever you want to call them, they probably all told you to stash his ass, and now he's back in Seattle.
Yeah, and I for one, I think I probably was talking about Noah Fant every other week. So, but the love for me and Noah Fant has been there for a long time. I mean, we're talking ever since he came in as a rookie, and it just hasn't happened. It hasn't worked out for him to be that top 10, top 12 level tight end at all. And when he got traded to the Seahawks, honestly, I was super pumped because I was like, cool, new face, new regime on, with the Seahawks. He's no longer with the Denver Broncos. And it just hasn't happened. I mean, we can think of all the other tight ends, whether it's Will Dissly, whether it's Colby Parkinson, like all these other tight ends are getting on the field. And I'm like, where the heck is Noah Fant? Like, even on like third down when he like passing situations. And so I feel like the volume just hasn't been there for him. And so not that that's going to change necessarily this year, because I mean, we're still talking about them having Tyler. They just re-signed Tyler Lockett. Still got JSN. You're assuming takes a step this year. You got DK Metcalf. So you're like, okay, cool. He's still like the number 4 option on the pecking order. But I do think the contract, I do think the way with the new offensive coordinator liking to run a ton of verticals, I think that is going to help out Noah Fant and his overall production.
I don't mean to cut you off. The Cincinnati Bengals just cut Joe Mixon.
Holy crap. Well, hey, Nikki, hopefully you stashed
I said I said what 10 minutes ago that I did not think that they would be cutting Joe Mixon. Holy shit. They cut him. So, yeah, man, this is where we're at. Joe Mixon is
breaking
going to
news.
my Minnesota Vikings heart just thought about Joe Mixon in purple and yellow, and oh my gosh, I hopefully. Anyways, she said I did stash the F out of him. So,
Yeah,
look, man, crazy.
that is
Johnny
crazy.
says Moss to Cincy. Yes, Zach Moss does sign a 2-year, $8 million deal with Cincinnati Bengals. So
Right now, he just did.
yes. So
Holy
cut
crap.
and
Let's
Zach Moss is
go.
in. Joe Mixon is out.
Let's
So
go.
wow.
I'm a Bengals fan.
Okay,
I like that. I like that signing.
we
Let's
got
go.
another running back in the free agent pool now. Joe Mixon is in the free agent pool. Going to be very interesting to see where he goes. I really do think that Minnesota landing spot would be awesome for Joe Mixon. But
You know what's happening right now in the free agent pool? We got Aaron Jones, we got Joe Mixon, we got Derrick Henry, we got all these older running backs, and it's like the Spider-Man meme where they're all like looking at each other, ready to shoot pointing at each other, because that's what's happening. Age is just a number, but for these guys, we'll have to see where they land.
Wow, man,
Nikki just said
that's
Moss
interesting.
Proud. Oh, that's hilarious.
It's gonna get crazy. It's gonna get some people excited. Got me a Devin fourth, Zach off waivers, and Kadarius Toney on my bench still. Good day so far. All right, man. Well, that's where we're at. So that was the breaking news. That's absolutely nuts that 10 minutes after I say I didn't think that shit was gonna happen, that shit happens. Anyways, guys, I'm human, I guess. I get things wrong too, so bear with me. But with that being said, we were talking about Noah Fant. And I think for me, man, it's what do we? I don't really want Noah Fant. What's the difference? What is the difference between Noah Fant and Irv Smith Jr. right now?
Noah Fant has a contract. That's huge.
I just don't see the difference between the two. Like, I mean, if we want to use the contract, like Colby Parkinson has a larger contract than Noah Fant right now. Like, I don't know, man. It's just, and he's going to be what, the fourth option on his team, fifth option on his team, like
okay,
with Geno Smith at the quarterback.
Let's give the people what they want. So, would you take Noah Fant or Chig right now? Dynasty.
Chig.
Okay, Noah Fant or Kate Otten?
Otten.
Noah Fant or my man, three-legged Greg Dulcich?
Greg.
So maybe he is appropriately valued according to you on some rankings. Would you take Jatavian Sanders or Noah Fant?
Oh, I'm taking JT Sanders by a mile.
Okay.
Yeah. Anthony said Chig, says Noah. Okay, so he says Noah over Otten. He's somewhere in that range. It sounds like he's being appropriately valued. But yeah, it's interesting. Dude, I still can't get over that Joe Mixon. That's pretty That's pretty nuts.
Right, live on stream. Love it.
Crazy. I'm just scrolling real quick just to make sure that we didn't miss anything else that came in while we were on.
I don't think so. I've been checking Twitter periodically to double check.
Jacoby Brissett, 1 year with the Patriots, and
he's
not probably going to do anything as a starting.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry's getting interest from the Ravens right now.
It'd be amazing. Good landing spot for him.
Yeah, it looks like that's about it. Darnell Mooney getting interest from the Chiefs. So yeah. Anthony says Sanders. Nikki says, what do I do with Ford? He's just sitting there on my roster. Jerome Ford?
Yeah.
Probably at this point, probably Jerome Ford probably should be sitting there on your roster, to be honest, with Nick Chubb still kind of recovering from the injury. We don't really know what he looks like yet. So I'd probably still be keeping Jerome Ford, even though it feels like it's not a very sexy asset to hold on to. But we got two more small pieces. We already hinted at it. Colby Parkinson. He got a 3-year deal, $22.5 million to go to the Los Angeles Rams. I find this very intriguing. And not because I think Colby Parkinson is very talented, but I think this has some value because Colby Parkinson there's a good chance that Colby Parkinson is on some of your guys' waiver wires. And if he's on your waiver wires, They just gave him $22 million with $15 million of it guaranteed. Tyler Higbee is going to be recovering from an ACL and a late ACL tear. So Colby Parkinson is tight end 1 in Los Angeles, at least today.
Yeah.
Probably for the foreseeable future. I don't know, man. It's interesting. And if he's on your waiver wire, definitely worth a bid right now.
Yeah, I know Anthony's saying Davis Allen. I know that he's been a very popular stash candidate as well, but I think Parkinson more helps in the running game.
So mid.
Like I still think this helps Kyron Williams more than it helps maybe Matt. Like I know he's going to be running routes, but he just hasn't proven to be a great pass catcher. And I mean, granted, he was out snapping my boy Noah Fant on 3rd down. So I'm over here preaching how excited I am about Noah Fant while at the same time bashing some Colby. I hear you, but I don't really know what to think. I'm not super excited. I think it's probably more of just a lateral move for his dynasty fantasy football value. Probably just a best ball play anyway.
Hey,
but
look, man, I play in some leagues that are very deep benches. I'm talking like 40 players on each roster. He's on the waiver wire in a couple of my leagues. I don't mind throwing a couple dollars fab to go and get him, throw him on the team. You hold him for a couple months, kind of see what happens, maybe through the NFL draft as we get into the training camps and things like that. And they're all tight end premiums. Like there's a situation where we're getting a player like this who could have some fantasy relevance next year. And if you can find a player that has fantasy relevance coming off of a waiver wire in dynasty leagues, a lot of the times that doesn't happen because these dynasty waiver wires are very, very depleted, especially in those leagues that I'm talking about where I have like 40 guys, like those waiver wires. Some of the best guys on the waivers right now are Tom Brady. Like what the hell? Like there's nobody out there. So, I mean, to get a guy like that on waivers, it's worth some fab. And I could see a situation where he has some value. I'm not saying that I'm going out and trading for Colby Parkinson, but if he's on the waiver wire, I'd pick him up. I'd pick him up for sure. But I don't feel like we need to talk about him too much. It's not like anything super crazy, but I found it interesting enough because he was one of the first tight ends signed today, and he got a decent amount of money that made me look at it and be like, they must have valued him pretty. Yeah. They must have valued him pretty decently. So, last and final topic, and I think this is the topic that is circling the internet all day long, every day for seems like months on end. Caleb, Justin Fields. What in the hell is going on? We got a report. This is the last report that we got today. It sounds like Atlanta hasn't even given Justin Fields any strong consideration. Well, we talked about it. Justin Fields had suitors in the Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons, the Raiders, a couple other teams that had supposedly had some interest, Denver, Minnesota, New England, like a lot of these teams that had some interest. More than half of these teams have went in other directions. And still, Justin Fields is sitting on the Chicago Bears roster, knowing that they're about to pick Caleb Williams number 1. I guess I got 2 questions for you here, and help me walk through this and help walk the viewers through this. The first question is, let's start with the first question is, what are some potential landing spots that are left where Justin Fields could be a starter this season? And if you have Justin Fields on your Dynasty Fantasy Football rosters today, what the hell are we doing with him?
Yeah, great question. So really like the spots where he could start, I mean, are just really have filled up today. I mean, really the main one is probably the Minnesota Vikings as like the only potential starting spot for him out there. And he's not going to get the Bears, I think, whether wrong or right, are not going to trade him to the Vikings. And who knows if the Vikings think Sam Darnold is better than Justin Fields, goodness gracious.
It says a lot.
So anyway, back to, I think this Justin Fields camp right now has to be looking at Justin Fields and being like, dude, you are going to be a backup next year. Or you're at least going to be in a situation where you're in a very heavy quarterback competition. So I don't know where he ends up. I honestly, if you had to put a gun to my head today and say, Caleb, where do you think he ends up? I think he ends up on the Seattle Seahawks. I think that's probably the best potential landing spot where he can sit behind Geno Smith for a year and then eventually come and overtake him, or something happens to Geno Smith this year, then you can kind of step in. for his dynasty fantasy football value, it just feels like we are hitting where Trey Lance was, where he held stable value because he had potential to play. And then all of a sudden the cliff happens and the ADP tanks significantly. So if you're holding on to Justin Fields right now, you can't trade him because the cliff just erupted on you. So you got to hold and hope the volcano explodes at some point to boost your value and the ADP back up on Justin Fields. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to be really patient with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is a talented quarterback. I know the metrics don't say that. I know we watched the highlights of him absolutely running, looking like Michael Vick out there, scoring the touchdowns, having the fantasy football days, but really not being a valuable, actual real life NFL quarterback. And so I just think he needs a little bit more time, maybe needs to be put in a new system, have, just a new culture around him, because the Chicago Bears, for whether wrong or right, their offense has struggled. Whether that was Justin Fields, all the fault needs to be blamed on Justin Fields. I don't think so, but I do think he definitely needs a little bit of new life. And so I just don't think he's going to be a starter this year, which is sad for Justin Fields, because I do feel like the Bears could have maybe found a home if they maybe weren't asking so much. But then the reports were today by like Ryan Poles hasn't even really tried to trade him. So then it's like, then what were you thinking was going to happen? You were going to hold on to him until the NFL draft. One of these draft team needy teams were going to miss out on one of the top 3-4 guys. And then they were going to give all the draft capital to then get Justin Fields from you. Like, that clearly isn't going to happen because there's not even enough spots that way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think Justin Fields ends up being a backup this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point of, Seattle potentially being a destination, to me, I think that's the best case scenario. Like, that is the best thing left, I think, for Justin Fields. If he can end up in Seattle and be the guy that takes over from Geno Smith or even beats out Geno Smith this year, because their coach hasn't been very committal to Geno Smith. Like, he's still kind of keeping the door open. I think that's the best case scenario. Now, with that being said, I think there's a few things that we can take from this whole situation. One, to your point of Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles, he pulled off a heist last year in the number 1 pick. He gets that massive haul. Everybody applauded him. Everybody said, "Oh man, Ryan Poles is a genius." Well, this year it has been operated very differently. I don't know if I don't know. And look, I know you see the purple jerseys and stuff. I promise I'm not, it's not like, I don't really even have any sentiment for the Chicago Bears. It feels like he felt like he was going to outsmart the NFL again. And that's just it's not realistic, man. Like, and I think the one thing, and he would, if he was on here today, he would sit here and back everything that I'm saying, because he's a Chicago Bears fan, true and true. And so he would say that Ryan Poles is sitting here talking about, we want to do right by Justin. We want to get him in a situation. We want to do it quickly. We want to make sure that he gets an opportunity to be a starter. And then all this shit never happens. Like, what are we doing? And I think, unfortunately for the kid, he got done dirty by the NFL, by his GM. They decided that he was not the starting quarterback, and they turned their back on him and said, "Thanks for the couple years. We're going to do what's best for us." And I think that's the unfortunate scenario for most of the NFL, is that when they figure out that they're done with you, they don't give a damn about what you did for them. It's just, we're done. And so I think that's one of the takeaways. And the other takeaway that I think, when we can kind of relate this back to a fantasy football lens, is I think at times people look at the NFL, real life football, what we watch on Sundays, and our fantasy football game, and they look at this and they say, there's a lot of correlation, but sometimes you have players who are not as good in real life, but they're very good in fantasy football. It's the rushing upside. It's the Justin Fields, the RG3s. Like, we've seen things like that where they come in, they're really good. But what do we see happen with these guys? They're good for us for a year or two. But at the end of the day, like, our dynasty fantasy football leagues, we are trying to, in a way, mimic the NFL. If you're not a good real life quarterback, we're not paying you money to be a starter in the NFL. And if you're not a starter in the NFL, then you're no good for my fantasy football team. And I think that's something that we forget at times. I've forgot it at times too, where it's like there's a disconnect. And I think you got to balance that out at times where, I think for better or worse, a lot of people would tell you that Kyler Murray is probably not a top 7 quarterback in the NFL, but he definitely is a top 7 quarterback in fantasy football. Like the way he scores is top 7. And I think that's where like the disconnect gets in there, because you have success stories like that, but we also have the boatload of unsuccessful stories. And I think, unfortunately, you brought up Trey Lance as a name. Justin Fields looks like he's next in line, and it's unfortunate because if you just don't cut it at the NFL level, unfortunately, you won't cut it in fantasy football. And everybody who had the hope for the upside and the high potential of Justin Fields because he rushes for a lot of rushing yards, it's not going to matter because he's not going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
The 2021 quarterback class is an absolute just rock bottom. It's Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Justin Fields. We'll have to see what happens with Trevor Lawrence. Maybe he can
Honestly,
save
Trevor
face,
Lawrence is the best by default, and he's been disappointing.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad, but that happens. It happens. And because then you'll get classes like 2020 where we get Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Tua, like we get all those guys, Jordan Love. Like we get all of those. Yep. Like, and it happens. That's fantasy football. That's dynasty fantasy football. At the end of the day, you know, we're trying to predict the future, baby, and we can only try and predict as well as we can.
And let's be clear, we as a dynasty community, out of every position, quarterback, that's the one that we literally cannot predict. Like we can base it off draft capital.
Bro, NFL GMs, their job being paid millions of dollars, they can't predict it.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
How many GMs get fired because they scout a prospect and get it wrong? Like it happens every year. It happens every year. And we're sitting here trying to play a game, and we're not even forget about it, man. Forget about it. At the end of the day, it is what it is. But I just wanted to bring Justin Fields up because I feel like that's probably going to be a very popular topic after today, after tomorrow, when a lot of these landing spots are going to start getting filled. I mean, shoot, I would not be surprised if in the next 24 to 48 hours, Minnesota does sign a Sam Darnold. Minnesota does get a player like that. And if they do, I think it takes them right out of the Justin Fields sweepstakes. Why would you sign Justin or Sam Darnold if you were going to trade for Justin Fields? It doesn't make sense. So we're going to lose these landing spots. Jacoby Brissett just went to the Patriots. If they were going to trade for Justin Fields, why would they sign Jacoby Brissett? Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think you're right. Right now, all eyes are on Seattle. What is Seattle going to do? I think that's the last ditch effort for Justin Fields.
Yeah. But do you think? I don't think there's any way the Chicago Bears hold on to him going to the season with Caleb Williams and Justin Fields.
It would be such a huge fumble by that organization to not get anything out of Justin Fields, and it would be so toxic for the locker room to have the guys that backed Justin Fields then have to put him on the bench and then kind of root for him as the backup. It would be so bad. It's a very bad PR move, and it's a bad organizational move from the Bears. So he would have to go somewhere. In fact, Ward texted me today and he says, and keep in mind, guys, this is the Bears fan. He says the best thing that Chicago could do for Justin Fields today, if Ryan Poles truly wants to do best by Justin Fields and do what's best for him, the best thing he'd do today is release him, cut him, and let him enter the free agent pool so he can go sign his next contract. If you can't get anything for him out of trade, you might as well let the kid go.
Yeah.
So that or you're asking a ridiculous asking price and nobody gives a damn about your asking price. Yeah. And I think that's more of the issue. I don't think teams would be reaching out to Sam Darnold or teams would be reaching out to Gardner Minshew unless your asking price was astronomical. It just doesn't make sense.
No. And I think the idea too that, okay, maybe we could draft Caleb Williams and we'll wait to see, one of those injuries that's going to happen in the, whether preseason or early in the off season and even to the early part of the season,
it's a bad business. It's bad business.
It's terrible because DJ Moore. If DJ Moore's in a locker room with Justin Fields or Caleb Williams, who is DJ Moore riding with? Your wide receiver 1 year alpha. He's riding.
Yeah, the
with
guy
Justin
who just
Fields.
got him his best season to date.
He's riding with Justin Fields, but you don't want that type of disparity, like you said, happening in the locker room. So, yeah, Ryan Poles. Listen. If he is as smart as the GM as we think he is, because we just saw what he did at Carolina, then he will figure this out. The issue is he should have already had it figured out, which is making me doubt everything about Ryan Poles.
Justin Fields, if there's to be any hope for Justin Fields, he needs to be off this roster in the next 48 hours. He needs to be gone in 48 hours or less. If he's here longer than that, it's fucking the end of him. We can't worry about him for fantasy football anymore. So, and at this point, like you said, if you've had Justin Fields on your team, baby, you are in for the rest of this ride, because this ride is crashing and it is going down, and we're just going to ride with it to the end, because at this point, like, unless you're getting offers like Anthony was getting, where he said he got Tua offered to him, like, I'm taking that and I'm running the hell out of town.
Yeah.
Like,
Get me out.
It's bad, man. It's bad. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about Justin Fields. I'm sure people will have, more comments about it in the comment section and things like that. But look, guys, that's going to be the end of our episode. I said 60 to 90 minutes. We went 2 hours. There's a lot of stuff to talk about today. Potentially, if tomorrow's a big day, I might do this again. Caleb, if you're interested, maybe we do it again tomorrow. If it's a big day, if there's not a lot of news, maybe not worth doing it. But we'll keep that on the back burner. If you guys like this episode, let us know in the comments below, either on Caleb's channel or on my channel. Make sure you guys are doing us a favor, hitting the like button. That is the best thing you guys can do for us. The best free and easy, simple thing you can do. That really does help us out. I know a lot of people think that like button doesn't really mean a lot. It means a lot to creators like us, especially when we're smaller creators. So make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. If you like content like this, you want more content like this, lots of stuff coming this offseason. Still lots of rookie content from me coming this month. So make sure you guys are in there. With that being said, Caleb, you got anything else for these people before we leave today?
Yeah, no, this is a blast. Anytime I get to hang out with you, Andrew, talk ball for 2 hours, like, sign me up. This was a blast. So I appreciate everyone tuning in. It was a great show, and we'll definitely be back.
Hell yeah. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.